Good afternoon. So imagine this. You have a new senior engineer join your organization. They've been given a task to integrate one of their finance APIs. They want to hit the ground running. They're eager to get going. So what do? They jump straight into the documentation. What do they find? Documentation is incomplete. So they think, well, let's try out the test request for that API. It fails. So they end up reaching out to one of their colleagues in the team and ask, do you know anything about this API? The response that comes back, you can't trust the documentation. You need to look at the source code. So the engineer starts scrolling through the source code, trying to understand the intricate details of how this API works. Hours are lost. Momentum has stalled. And the engineer is finding they're spending more time trying to understand the API than actually using the API. This situation isn't unique. It's becoming the norm. APIs are no longer just for the back office. They actually are the business. And according to Gartner, in 2024, 71% of all web traffic is flowing through an API. And as APIs are taking center stage, developer experience is becoming as critical as the APIs themselves. But here's where we hit friction. Almost half of the engineers still rely on their colleagues to understand an API. It's not tutorials, it's not documentation or even a portal, it's their colleagues. And as APIs, and in this era where APIs are, the demand for APIs are increasing, we can't have our engineers falling down on the first hurdle trying to understand the APIs. And what makes matters worse is those engineers, if they can't get the answer from their colleagues, they end up looking at the source code. That's like trying to understand how a car works by taking a flashlight, going under the chassis, and trying to see if they can work it out. Now, you'll get to the answer, but it's going to be very slow, painful, and just isn't scalable. Now, let's add another dimension to this, AI. And according to Postman, they've seen a 73% increase in AI-driven API traffic. Think of it like this. All your LLMs, your recommendation engines, your agentic processes, they all rely on APIs. And AI is not just increasing the amount of traffic, it's actually increasing the stakes. Because with AI, it's not just a single developer making a call to your API. It's possibly hundreds of thousands of requests happening at scale and in real time. So the question is, are our developers equipped to be able to create, explore, and manage the APIs at this scale and complexity? What if our engineers didn't have to feel this pain? What if they had a single place that they could go to where they could find out about the APIs, they could create, they could explore, and they could manage? Well, today I'm going to show you how this can be achieved using the Konnect Developer Portal. APIs, or API portals, have come a long way since static documentation. They have evolved into full developer experiences where users can get credentials, they can look at code samples or code snippet samples, and they can test out the APIs before they go live. This, sorry, I lost my train of thought. This evolution has been necessary as the API landscape has exploded. It's no longer just REST APIs, it's async APIs, it's GraphQL, it's gRPC, and it's event-driven architectures. But at the same time, APIs aren't being centrally built anymore. They're being federated across multiple teams, business units within your organizations. They live in different systems. They are being deployed by multiple different pipelines as well. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to create a single unified portal or catalog of your APIs. And this is starting a trend where we're seeing multiple specialist portals being created that are very tailored to the audience as well as the purpose, but all linked together with the same governance and a similar experience. Broadly speaking, there are two types of portals. There's an internal portal and an external portal, but both with very different purposes and audiences. An internal portal is more for your internal teams within the organization. An external portal is more for your consumers outside the organization, as well as partners and clients or customers. From a purpose standpoint, your internal portals are there to help promote the reuse of APIs, as well as the governance of them, and giving the teams the ability to find the APIs that they're looking for. When it comes to your external portals, well, it's there to promote the adoption of your APIs, possibly monetization, as well as streamlining the onboarding of your consumers. So as the role of the portal, the API portal, is evolving, I think it's important for us to define what great developer experience looks like. And in my opinion, it comes down to 3 pillars: create, explore, and manage. Firstly, we want them to be able to create. We want our engineers or our developers to be able to onboard their APIs to the portal quickly and seamlessly. Next, we want them to be able to explore. They need to be able to find the APIs, understand the APIs, and test the APIs with confidence. And lastly, we want them to be able to manage. They need to be able to manage the access to the APIs. They need to be able to create self-service credentials, as well as monitor the usage of the API. And as these 3 pillars come together, what you'll find is your portal becomes more than just documentation. It becomes an ecosystem that connects your builders of the APIs to your consumers of the APIs. So I'm going to show you today, I'm going to demo the Konnect Developer Portal, where I'll show how these 3 pillars can be achieved. For this demo, I've created a fictitious company called Wild Tri Co. It is a triathlon company that has all the APIs for running a successful triathlon business. I've also created a public GitHub repo where you can go to after this talk and have a look at all of the infrastructure as code for you to build a portal in the same fashion, as well as onboard APIs and documentation, and the pipelines included as well. And I'll share the link after this talk. So let's look at the first pillar, the create pillar. The persona here is for your API producers. And the idea here is to give them the ability to onboard their APIs as quickly as possible. Do I have to zoom in? No, it looks all right. So this is the GitHub repository, which I'll share the link with you after as well. But there is some documentation that explains how it works. There's a link to the portal as well that is running on Konnect. So please feel free to go and have a look at that after the talk. But let's have a look at onboarding an API. So I've got a pull request here for a new medal API, so we can award medals to the winners of our triathlon races that we're going to be running. And if I have a look at the changes to this, there are 2 very simple changes. So the first I'm going to look at here is just a very simple open API specification. So it's got all of the resources needed with the metadata relating to that API. Now, you can obviously adjust this and have your APIs living elsewhere, calling them with a URL, but in this use case, I've just got them as part of the repository. Then the next is just a metadata file. And this just has the metadata about the API. So there's the current version, there's the name and description, as well as some attributes. And those attributes I will show you is how we're going to be categorizing our API and searching for it. You can have multiple versions of your API as well. You might be managing multiple versions. And then some API docs, which in this particular one, I'm not deploying any docs, but you can add those docs as well. As part of this, just to show you here, I have got some GitHub actions that have run, which have run a vacuum linting. And you can see there, all of my checks have passed, which means I'm able to merge. So that's a bit of governance around what we will be deploying to the portal. So what I'm going to do, and hopefully the demo gods are on my side today, I'm going to merge this pull request, and we're going to see that merge through. I'm now going to jump into my actions. And this will be all automated. There's my merge. And we're going to see it running Terraform and auto-deploying this to the portal. So we'll let that run. And it should hopefully come back with, that was my plan, and that was my apply. Yep, there we go, adding my API, and everything passed successfully, and that will go green. So that is how easy it is to onboard an API to the portal. We'll have a look at that on the portal when we look at the next pillar. So let's go to the next pillar. The next pillar is exploring. And the idea here is being able to categorize your API so you can find what you're looking for. So it's categorizing it, it is filtering it so that you can filter, especially if you've got hundreds of APIs, and then some level of searching those APIs as well. The idea here as well is to be able to apply ownership and for your teams to be able to find who owns those APIs as well. So let's jump in and actually have a look at that in practice. So here's my API portal for my company, WildTry.co, and I'm just going to go to the APIs page. What you'll see straight away is on the left-hand side is the filters, and those are those attributes that I spoke about. So it's a way of being able to filter all my APIs. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just filter on the analytics business function here. And what you should see, the second one there is our Metal API, the one that we just onboarded a couple of seconds ago. But what I'm really interested in is the Finance API, because if you remember from the beginning, this is what the senior engineer needed to do as their first task as they joined the company. They needed to find the Finance API and integrate about getting invoices. So jumping to that and having a look at the API then has a whole lot of information about itself. Well, actually, firstly, let's have a look at that. Sorry, is the versions. There can be multiple versions with a particular current version. So 1.3 is the current, but you can then manage multiple versions and the user can go between the versions. We then have a lot of documentation that explains about the portal. It gives them a quick start where they can quickly get started and try it out. It explains the authentication mechanism for that API. We have a change log, which then tells what has changed between every single version. So you can see they start understanding about the API right from the beginning. Then if we jump into the actual rendering of the API, this is the API that I was after. It is the list all invoices API. So again, standard renderer where you can see your code samples on the right and the information of the API in the middle. Now, if I wanted to actually search for it, let's say I didn't know which API to come into, well, you actually have a very advanced searcher. So if I search for invoices, what you'll find is it'll actually come back with information from documentation on the site, as well as the actual resources within your API. And you can then go and click straight into that, and that one there takes you straight to the resource on that API, and you can start looking into it a bit more and even testing it out. So that's exploring. Next pillar is managing. So this is for the persona of your API consumers. It is giving them the ability to manage access to the APIs by API subscriptions. It's giving them the ability to generate credentials so that they can access the APIs. And then it's allowing them to look at the usage of that API and understanding how they're using that particular API. So let's jump straight back into this particular invoices API. What I'm going to do is just show you quickly, if I try this, just make sure that's not set, I should get a 401, which is correct, right? It's authentication. I need an API key before I can try out this API. So let's try it out. We have this use API in the top here, and this is now asking me to create an application because for this particular user, I don't have an application. So I'm going to create one called Demo App. And what's really convenient is not only will it create the application for me, but it also creates the key for me as well. So what I can do is take this key, copy it, and then I can paste it in there. And that will then add the API key to my request. I'm now going to try this again, and as long as it's synced to the data plane quickly, it did, I get my 200 response. So I've now been able to try that API and get the response back for that API. If I now go to my profile, which is actually just at the top right here, there's a profile, and then I refresh it, you'll now see the application that it created for me on the API page. Jumping into that application, we can see that I've got one subscription to that business API, and it's approved as well. I've got auto-approval set, but you can obviously have an approval process rather than have it auto-approved. If I go to credentials, you'll see there's my one credential there that it created for me, but you can come here and create more credentials if you want as well. When I go to analytics, there's my one request that I just made. So actually, if I come here and just try this out a couple more times, just to show you that it actually does work. It takes a few seconds to sync, and there are my 3 requests that I've just made. So where do we go to from here? You've got a portal, you've got consumers on the portal. What are the day 2 operations that you need to think about? Well, I think the success to any portal is around how much the portal is being adopted. And I think there are 4 signals you can use to measure this. It's how quickly are your developers getting started? Are they sticking around? How engaged are they with your portal? And what do they think about your portal? So let's jump into the first one, time to hello world. This is a measure that tells you how long it takes an engineer to register for the portal, get approved, create a credential, and make a successful API call. If this is happening in minutes and not hours, you're doing something right. Next, we look at retention. How many of your developers are sticking around? You can measure this by having a look at your active consumers of your portal on those APIs and having a look at the requests they're making over a period of time. This should give you an indication on whether the portal is promoting exploration or increasing frustration. Then we get to engagement. How engaged are your users on the portal? Are they using the tried function? How long are they spending on your API documentation? Are you getting repeat visits to the portal as well? This will give you an indication of what's working and what's not working. And lastly, satisfaction. Numbers only give you parts of the picture. Actually understanding whether your engineers would recommend your portal and how they would rate it is very important as well. These 4 signals paint a very clear picture about your portal. A portal is not just about attracting developers. It's about empowering them, retaining them, and turning them into advocates. So, some final recommendations for getting started with a developer portal. The first is treating the portal like an API product, like a normal product that you have within your organization, not a ticket in your ticketing system or just a task that an engineer does. You need to allocate an owner to the portal. You need to give the portal a budget and possibly even give it an engineering team as well, and that will help with its success. The next is actually creating multiple portals specific to your audience and your purpose as well. Now, most companies, you'll probably have an internal and an external, but it's very dependent on your consumers as well. So you may have more or less depending on the structure of your consumers. And lastly is technology as well. Which technology should you use? And this is one that I see companies fall down very often. Rather than building a portal against what a technology offers, you should be defining your requirements that you want, how and what do you want from a portal within your organization. You should then do a technology mapping of your requirements to the technology, and if there's a gap, either find another technology or work with the vendor to fill that gap. And one last piece of recommendation from myself, just get going. especially with an internal portal. Something is better than nothing. And as you start increasing the visibility of your APIs within your organization, you'll start to understand the maturity of APIs within your company. And when you give the developers these tools, they will be able to create, explore, and manage their APIs seamlessly. Thank you very much.